Mandla, it's a very big pleasure for me to be here tonight, sharing the stage with you. Hopefully we will not learn only some interesting stuff about your new book, but also about you through our conversation. Welcome, thank you, and to all of you, welcome for joining us. Thank you, Exclusive Books, for hosting this event. Let's get going. You are a chartered accountant, but, okay, pardon me for saying this. You know where I'm going with this. This is not normally a job or a career I associate with a lot of flair and creativity and artsy stuff. How and when did you start writing? When did the bug bite you?
Yeah, so it's a weird combination. I started writing at school. So when I grew up in Zimbabwe, we didn't have many books to read, but my father was an English teacher, so the house was flooded with Shakespeare, Charles Dickens. So at an early age, we got exposed to the arts. And when I was 16, I entered an essay competition. Just for fun, and then I was surprised when I came third in that competition. So that's when I discovered that I could write. But then I followed a career in accounting.
We forgive you. So you were quite young. Actually, on that topic, you were the youngest partner globally for the esteemed company Ernst & Young. You received a doctorate in business administration in the US of A, in virginity at the Liberty University. I want to know how your academic career and a career in finance influenced your writing and your way and approach to writing.
So, finance is just numbers, so it didn't have a big impact. When I was doing my master's and my doctorate, there's a lot of research that you do. So a doctoral thesis is about 250 pages. So that's a lot of writing practice. Yeah. But in leading up to it, you probably write many sets of 40 pages for each semester or each module. But I think the biggest thing that helped me with writing was when it comes to research. If you look at The Fallen Angel, there's a lot of research that went into it. I think I read about 300 books.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
Yes, so I think honing that skill of researching and summarizing facts and presenting them succinctly is probably where that side of my career helped. And also write lots of board reports as well. So that's not fiction. So that also helps.
Emphasis on board.
So, like I mentioned, you studied in America. How long were you there, and did the fact that you lived there change your perspective about South Africa and the challenges we have here, or maybe even in a broader sense?
Yeah, so I didn't live there, so it was a degree that you could do remotely, but they had an arrangement where you could go there for certain interval, but that's when COVID hit, so I missed the opportunity to actually be there physically. But it was interesting to be in this American faculty with people from all over the world. Like when we used to do assignments, we'd cross maybe 10 time zones. And for me, what was impactful there was LAPA University focuses a lot on values. So every single module, whether it's finance or supply chain, they focus a lot on the purpose, why we're in business, and faith as well. So that part was also quite impactful because it was seeing business not through the lens of just making money, but also through what role business has in society.
So business plays a big part in your life. You have several day jobs. You write, you're a father, you run marathons, you do cross-country stuff, play squash. How do you juggle all of that and so seamlessly and apparently so successfully everything?
I wouldn't say successfully, so some things do fall through the cracks. And yeah, it hasn't been by design. I got involved in a not-for-profit called the Health Foundation, and then through that I was introduced to a health insurance company, so I got involved with that. And then I got involved, through that I was invited to the Sports Science Institute of South Africa, and then Western Cape Blood Service saw me, and they're like, okay, come join our board as well. So it was a series of
unfortunate events?
yes. Yeah, so maybe I should have said no at some point, but I didn't.
I want to know about your jobs, but you literally just told us what you do. Let's skip to the good part. Your first book at Penguin Random House, Conquer Your Mountains, is a devotional. In your own words, it's a 52-week spiritual journey. Quickly tell us about that book.
Yeah, so that book took me 12 years to write. And the main reason was that it was originally a personal journal. So back in 2010, I used to take lots of notes. I had the goal of reading the whole Bible in a year and just expressing my thoughts as I read through it. Yeah, so I did that, and then I thought of self-publishing it, but then I forgot about it for many years. And then when I did my doctorate, I made a personal pledge that if I finished my doctorate, I would then publish that book. So then that doctorate came, and I had no choice but to seek a publisher. So I wouldn't say I was forced into it. I think I just felt that my thoughts could make an impact to people who are in the business world. And often the people who write devotionals are in church, like in ministry. And I'd read quite a few devotionals where I couldn't see business examples coming through. So I thought, okay, here's my chance to fill a gap in the market. I submitted a proposal to a whole lot of literary agents, and then Penguin drew the short straw. Yeah, well, the rest is history.
Your editor Mandla said this book was literally written in the clouds. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I used to work a lot in Johannesburg. So back in the 2010s, I had a weekly commute, and then I used to take out my laptop and work. And I thought, okay, hang on, I'm already getting up at 4 a.m. To fly. Let me rather use that time for my personal writing. So 80% of that book I was actually on a plane commute to Joburg or vice versa.
Hopefully, well,
and that's where the mountains came from.
Lots of mountains to conquer. Did the writing process change at all when you started writing The Fallen Angel? Or do you still write on a plane?
No, thankfully my job is a 6-kilometer commute, so there's no more planes. Yeah, the writing process changed significantly. I didn't know how to write fiction at all. I didn't know how to write dialogue. So one day when we were discussing Conquer Your Mountains with my editor, I said, I've got this idea to write a fiction book. And she was like, okay, tell me more. And then I said, okay, science fiction. So she said, okay, well, that's a very hard genre to write. And she explained that science fiction is the biggest market in South Africa, but most science fiction books are imported because it's not easy to merge science and writing together. So I said to her, okay, I'll take up the challenge. I had to relearn from scratch how to create dialogue. And my first draft was very bad, and I had to rewrite it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask how the transition was from devotional to science fiction. How many drafts did you go through? How many rewrites? Did you attend some sort of writing school, or was Amanda, the editor, just like helping you from the wayside?
Yeah, she did help me with some very broad guidelines. So, for example, in fiction, you've got this art of writing called show and don't tell, which I didn't know. So, for example, I'd write a scene saying Lydia was very angry. So like, no, you can't do that. You have to describe her, and then the reader must decide if this person is angry. So, yeah, so that was from the first draft. And also just understanding how to leave a trail of mysteries along. I often assume that the reader can't pick up the hidden things in that book. So my first draft, the story was too obvious. And you'll see with this final draft, you might have to read it twice.
Actually, well, if you look at your CV and online, it says this is your second book. But if we take your master's and your doctorate into account, and you had a couple of self-published books as well, this is actually the 11th book. What was the other books about?
Yeah, so I was surprised you discovered that part of my history. Yeah, so when I left EY, I went into business and set up a health and wellness company. And the idea was to be a one-stop shop for all things health. So with a small team, we created these workbooks. So we had a workbook on diet, a workbook on healthy habits, a workbook on stress management. They were not big books, like about 70 pages each, but with lots of pictures.
That doesn't count.
Yes. Yeah.
Quickly, you and Amanda also are busy with the podcast about Conquer Your Mountains. Is it in conjunction? Is it complementary? Does it differ a lot? What is the reason behind the podcast, and where can we listen to it?
Yeah, so the podcast is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, virtually all podcast sources that you can find. And the idea was that because Conquer Your Mountains is 52 weeks, what we were creating was a companion podcast. So for the person that doesn't want to read everything, the main difference between the podcast and the book is that quite topical in terms of discussing issues about personal leadership. So the last episode was around how do you seize the 480 minutes that you have in your workday and make the most of it. So you can listen to the podcast by itself, but it is reference to the Conquer Your Mountains book. So if you have both, it's a bonus. And the podcast is free.
Great. Okay, let's get to this bad boy.
Yes.
This is Christian science fiction, so it's a subgenre, and it's not a genre that I'm very familiar with. I don't know about you. This is the first book in the genre that I've read. Are you a fan? Do you have lots of authors in the genre that you follow? What exactly triggered you to write in this specific genre?
Yeah, I found that science fiction and Christianity, there's very few books in that line. I used to be a fan of the Left Behind series, where it's the end of the world and some people, they vanish and they're taken up and planes crash and things happen and everyone else is left to fend for themselves. So that was one of the early future thinking books that I read. I also read the likes of Ted Dick, Frank Peretti. But what I realized is that most books like that, they'll set it in the future, but they won't use the science fiction tools that this genre allows you to use. So it's normally in a broken world where society has collapsed. So it's in the future, but it's not science fiction. So I thought, okay, maybe I can challenge that and create true Christian science fiction, because I felt that there was a gap in the market. And the power of science fiction is, and that's why it's one of the most popular genres. When you read it, it transports you to another world. And when you're reading it, you are stationed there. And that's why the likes of Harry Potter were probably some of the biggest selling books in the world, because people like to be transported to another world. So when you write science fiction or fantasy, you're tapping into that need that people have to escape, think of the world from a different perspective.
So, I'm not mistaken if I say this is the first one of its kind in South Africa to be published. So this is a groundbreaking publication in South Africa. That's amazing. How does it make you feel?
Well, the bookshop said they'll struggle to know where to put it. So,
Right in front.
yes. Yeah, so I think the challenge with trying to create a new subgenre is there can be uncertainty in the market about where to place it. And I'd say the answer is that it's all of the above. So there's science fiction, there's a love story in there, there's a thriller element, there's history. Yeah, so think of it as a melting pot.
You are annoying them tremendously.
Yes.
So, the book reviewer Jonathan Amit calls this book a pulse-pounding, genre-defying, faith-based thriller with endless intrigue. Sean Fraser says the following: "What a joy this was. Probably the most novel and innovative work I've come across in ages." This is very high praises indeed. Without giving too much away, for those of you who haven't read the book yet, please give us a short rundown.
Okay, so the book is set in the year 2233, and when you read it, you'll find there's a reason why I chose that year, 200 years from now, but I won't tell you why. And you've got this explorer, his name is Micah, and basically they go around rescuing people who are trapped. And for a year, planes have been flying over the Antarctic, and they see this energy source pulsating from deep underground, and then Micah decides to actually go and investigate it. So he's got a bat suit, if you can imagine, think Avengers, so he can sort of fly. His teammates beg him not to see what's there before reinforcements arrive, but he's like, what if someone is dying there? We can't wait, because they're in Antarctica. So he dives down. It's a 3.5 kilometer glacier to the bottom, and it really exists. So it's the deepest spot on Earth, deeper than the Dead Sea. That's not in the sea. So he dives down, and as he's diving down, he's got all these sensors on his suit, but they can't pick up the ice that's sticking out on the sides, because you can see through ice. So he hits one of the icicles, his suit malfunctions, and then there's a live feed of him tumbling into this glacier, and transmission stops. So his teammates fear that he is dead, and they fly back to their commander. The commander's name is Cornelius Joshua. You'd also find that the names have a hidden meaning, but anyway. So they go to him, and then his childhood friend, she's climbing the Drakensberg. So she's quite a tough lady. She's an ex-Marine. She grew up with him on a farm in the Karoo. And she gets this call that Micah disappeared. So she gets from Durban to Cape Town in 90 minutes in a high-speed train. So trains will be working again. And she basically tells the commander that she doesn't believe Micah is dead, because when she reviews the footage, there's a strange flash, which she believes means he could have survived. So she calls this historical professor, he's an archaeologist that was injured in a war, so he's wheelchair bound. He's quite a nerd, And he analyzes the footage, and then as he's analyzing the footage, he spots some ancient writing which shouldn't be from this time. It's like from prehistoric times, and he thinks, could this be a fallen angel? And some demons overhear this conversation, and that's the story. It's a race to find Micah. Lydia is obviously she's in love with him, you'll find out in the book. And then you've got all these creatures that now come out of history trying to also find the fallen angel, because he's got something with him that can allow them access back to heaven and reverse the mysteries of the apocalypse.
I think you should stop there now, because everyone is sitting like this. More. No, by the book. You mentioned Joshua, we've got Peter, Simeon, Micah, Michael. I love how you incorporate biblical characters and also the characteristics into the book. Did you have a lot of fun doing that? Was it important for you to do that?
Yes, it was, because I felt that if someone wanted to do a character study, quite a lot of revelation would come to light. So, for example, Peter in the book, he is very forward, and if you know Peter from the Bible, quite like, I want to be the one first, and so on. So, you've got those characteristics, and if you know those stories, it can give you an idea of what might happen to that character. So, it's part of the second layer of mystery, which you'll uncover when you do your second reading.
Talking about fun, there's also quite a lot of humor in the book and a couple of laugh out loud moments. Do you think humor is necessary to convey the messages in your book?
It is. Some of the humor wasn't intentional. So in one case I was trying to create this scene where all these demons are gathering and they are squabbling off and things like that. But after I wrote it, it actually came out as a very funny scene. I was trying to write horror, but it didn't work. So you'll find that the bad guys, they crack jokes, they do bad things, but in a way that you are able to just try and see what happens in the mind of a bad guy who's trying to be bad but failing really well. So you'll have lots of laughs when you read the book. So yeah, so that's the comedy part of the book, which got in by accident.
Do you think God has a sense of humor, or is religion not a laughing matter?
I think so. I think he was probably laughing as he saw me trying to put this book together.
When you read this book, it's very apparent that you are extremely detail-oriented, especially when it comes to the science part of the science fiction. I can see you are very meticulous. Did you have to rein yourself in a bit, not to get too deep into the specifics?
Yes, because so what separates science fiction from fantasy is that with science fiction, the concept that you create has to be plausible. So you can't do it yet, but you can imagine that in, say, 200 years people could be able to do it. So, for example, you've got a levitating train, and that's possible except that you need a certain type of metal, it's called moissanite, and it's available in very small quantities on Earth. So, in my hypothesis, by the year 2233, a billionaire has managed to find a way to get to the planet Mars, and we know of a billionaire like that. And he's now been able to ship all these moissanite rocks back to Earth, which enable this advanced transportation to be possible. So I wanted to be true to the story in terms of explaining how these things actually work. Because without explaining it, you're like, okay, that's just wishful thinking. And that's what makes the book seem more realistic, because with those explanations of, oh, okay, this, maybe these things are actually real. So I'm hoping the book will keep you up at night.